right, welcome everybody to Orlando. So again, my name is Taylor Premer. This is Brett Winchester. We own a little company called Gestalt Education, and we have a podcast, which this will be aired out through. Gestalt Education was basically built on integration, which is why I'm so happy to be sitting down here with this amazing panel. I've been lucky enough, Brett and I have been lucky enough to be a fly on the wall when it comes to having just unbelievable people to sit down with, and today is no exception to that. And so a little bit of background on Gestalt Education. Integration is the name of everything, and that's again what this panel is all about. We know that ART is one of the most powerful techniques in manual therapy techniques on the planet. RockTape, Kinetisense, all these things are amazing individually. However, what makes them so special and so incredible is when we integrate them in with other things, and that's what today's all about. So to my left, everybody knows him. Give him a round of applause, Dr. Michael Leahy, so the founder of Active Release Techniques. So a lot of people don't know this about Dr. Leahy, but he was actually cut his teeth as a fighter pilot with the Air Force. And so we've been lucky enough to have some amazing stories about that. But I know that that's where a lot of his engineering background and kind of his analytical mind comes from. And so thank you, Dr. Leahy. To the next, Dr. Ryan Comeau. So round of applause for Dr. Ryan Comeau. So Ryan is the developer of Kinetisense, and if you haven't had a chance to stop by the booth of Kinetisense, Kinetisense is leading the world when it comes to motion capture. And the thing that intrigues Brett and I so much about Kinetisense is that it brings it to your hands. So many of us have seen these amazing motion capture rooms if you go to a Major League Baseball facility and things like that. However, for us in this room, some of those things don't make a lot of sense. And so bringing it to your hands is what makes Ryan such a special human. And so we're super thankful. To his left, Dr. Stephen Capobianco, which I got his name right. Goes by Capo. Give him a round of applause. A lot of people know RockTape as the leading kinesiology taping manufacturer in the world. However, RockTape also is one of the leaders when it comes to manual therapy, different add-ons, technology in this space too. And so Capo not only is an innovator, but he's just one of the coolest humans I've ever met in my life. And so Capo all the way from Austin. So thank you. So if I could, I just wanted to kind of start off with Brett. We've been lucky enough to sit down with all of these humans. We've kind of discussed a little bit about integration of these different things. Can you kick us off with maybe just a little bit of where do you feel like these kind of things start, and where do they integrate into our treatment room and into manual therapy?
Well, it all started for me probably literally 21 years ago, where there really wasn't many choices back then. It was manipulation. Craig Levinson had his rehabilitation group going, and there was ART. And anybody who was treating athletes at that time, this is 20 years ago, was utilizing active release techniques. And then for those of us who've utilized in the room, we see this is one of the most powerful modalities in the world that exists. I mean, it's just, when we talk about soft tissue management, there is nothing more powerful than active release technique. And then I think we all get mesmerized and really get invigorated. When we got around Mike, I think 2 years ago again. I went through all the courses when I was young. And I remember leaving Colorado Springs and telling Taylor, being like, gosh, he's just so inspiring from a palpation standpoint. And I just feel like, if we're talking about the Mount Rushmore in our profession, Mike Leahy owns a place on that. So we really appreciate that. Those of us who are integrating other things like DNS, dry needling, all the things that you probably already know, we feel like the best clinicians in the world, they're able to integrate these things at the right time in the right place. And we think ART is very, very important for that. So, and then with Ryan's work with the technology side of it, I think all of us in this room can agree sometimes the best manipulators, the best people at soft tissue, maybe they're a little weak on the technology side of things. We have a little saying. We say, in God we trust, everyone else bring numbers. So those of us who are good with manual therapy, sometimes we're not so good on the objectifying of things. So whatever we can do to get ourselves better in that world, typically, sometimes the better you are at manual therapy, the worse you are at objectifying some of the things that we're doing. But moving forward, I think that's really important in all our manual techniques, so we know the science behind exactly why we're doing what we're doing. Capo is just Capo. So Capo is just a superstar in our profession, and he's got so much to offer. I love people like Capo because he's kind of known for RockTape, but he could give a lecture on rehabilitation. He could give a lecture on manipulation, soft tissue treatment. So he's just an absolute superstar in our profession. In saying all that, and I said all that to say what I'm about to say, the future of contemporary chiropractic or physical therapy or massage therapy is the integration of all these pieces together. And it's really not that you know how to do all these different things. It's that you know how to triage your cases appropriately. Therefore, you know how to use this really powerful tool at the right time and place. So that's kind of what I
love that. And so can I kick it to Dr. Leahy? Can you talk about why bring us all in here to Orlando to an ART seminar to talk about technology and to talk about, I don't know, where we all fit in this world of manual therapy and rehabilitation, chiropractic, whatever you want to call it?
Well, the reason for us to get together, I think, the mission of ART is to raise the quality of healthcare for the general public. So if we can raise it for the general public, money, timing, who gets to do it, that's beside the point. We want to raise the quality of care. And I think all of you guys have done that. If you look at the global track record of ART, it's saved so many people's jobs, it saved companies money, but it's improved. But we need to go another big step. And that big step is being able to diagnose in a better way. And we diagnose by palpation. But I think we need help. We need to integrate a little more with people who are really good at getting numbers. Who would that be?
Yeah, right.
And also getting numbers here, or changes in tissue. These two guys are really good at measuring. So it's a real exciting process that we had a brainstorming session this morning. I wish you guys could have been in on it. It was really exciting because I was worried, with us starting together, that it would be a really painstakingly slow process. And there was so much more to be developed, and there always is, but these guys are so far ahead of what I thought they were that we're going to be able to put a really good program together to take all of our ART providers a huge leap forward in the diagnosis, but also documentation, objectifying what we do, and a level of data collection that I think I'm not aware of anyone who's done anything close to it in the world. And that to me is really exciting because we're going to make a lot of people better by making us better.
One thing too that technology might help us to get good at too, I feel like in the world of soft tissue, we're used to saying, well, the patient has a lateral elbow problem, so we're just going to do soft tissue techniques around the lateral elbow. So maybe technology will help us be able to have more of a global approach in the world of soft tissue. The fancy term is regional interdependence, which basically means you are almost unplugged from the site of where the patient or the athlete is having their symptoms. So it's really easy, especially when you're young, you go right to the spot where the patient is hurting. We do our treatment. A lot of times you have a good outcome. But then as you move along in your career, I feel like you kind of understand how interconnected the body is, and it's a closed kinematic system. So in the world of soft tissue, if we can have technology that would potentially basically be able to help us to look away from the site of symptoms, I think that could also be a really good message that would resonate well for all the people that are doing soft tissue techniques, I think. And yeah, I think technology would allow us to be able to do that and help us.
So kind of a little background from my point before we really kind of get into the deep diving questions and we get away from the fluff a little bit is we were tasked with saying, how do we utilize technology and data to improve patient outcomes? Because that's what we're all in it for, right? It's for our patients. That's why we got into this profession. That's why you continue to innovate. That's why you're still asking questions this far into your career. And so what I kind of want to, tip it to Ryan first is, we have all this amazing technology and Kinetisense being technology. So how, can we use technology to, not only show us and prove that we're right on why we're doing things and things like that, but how do we actually connect that back to the patient and improve outcomes?
Yeah, no, and a fantastic question, and what an honor it is to be here. I want to thank all of you for this opportunity. I remember taking my first ART course. It was about 15 years ago, and it was that course that actually propelled me into this goal of trying to add objectivity into the MSK field. And so I want to thank you for that. It totally put me on a career path that is passion driven. It was definitely from my ART training that really catapulted that. So, we have to remember, and we're all the top 1%, or you're all the top 1% of the MSK field, right? The fact that you invest in a technique like ART puts you into that 1%. But we have to remember that it's really the patient that drives the ecosystem, our clinical ecosystem. Why do we do what we do? It's to drive outcome. That's all that matters. So if we think about the importance of technique, we think about the importance of therapies. That's something as chiropractors, physical therapists, massage therapists, all of us here, we're very, very technique driven, intervention driven. That's what we do. That's what we're so good at. But we have to remember that the journey of the patient interaction starts with assessment. So if we can assess globally and we can get a mapping of the body three-dimensionally, triplanar we call this, how does that person sequence? How do they compensate? Potentially that pain that they're feeling in one of these joints, or that dysfunction they're feeling in one of these joints, is actually that joint having to overcome or take over movement deficit in a triplanar way somewhere else in the body. So that's what Kinetisense does. And we do it very, very efficiently. We allow the clinician within the matter of a minute to be able to get that mapping. The powerful thing is now we've shown that patient at the beginning of that journey, these are the areas of compensation that we have to go after. This is where you are functionally at that given point, and we're going to take strategies like ART, corrective exercises, taping, to move you down that pathway to better function, better movement, and away from risk of injury, potential risk of injury.
Beautiful. In Capo, I know that you two have formed a pretty good relationship, have been having a lot of good conversations kind of on that same basis. Where do you feel like motion capture, maybe not even specifically motion capture, but technology on this route of assessment, we'll put it that way, fits into the modern day manual therapist?
It's a great question. I'll just say full disclosure, there's my imposter syndrome index is pretty high right now in respect to being in line with all of the panelists. So I, again, also appreciate the opportunity, but I have a different spin on how I'm leveraging, how I think we should leverage technology is more so of a tool of connection. You bring up the word integration as it relates to integrating potentially different manual therapy approaches and technologies, but I'm talking about integrating and connecting to our patients, that creating that therapeutic alliance. And I've had much more success of leveraging technology to educate, to be able to get that buy-in. With all due respect, and we did our reset yesterday, Ryan and I did, and I'm appreciating, I was even echoing how appreciative I was as it relates to the new art of palpation. You guys are all recognizing that, at least I hope you guys are, is seeing that trend and being very skilled in what we're doing with our hands. But I find, and this is probably a personal thing on my end, is that echoing or communicating that to my patients sometimes is difficult. To create that connection with them, say, can you feel that? And I'm trying to convey even with words, and I always had difficulty, but taking advantage of technology to show them on a screen, using Kinetisense as a motion cap, and I use multiple other technologies, including MSK ultrasound, of showing the individual what I'm feeling and what they're experiencing helps to build that buy-in, and then I get ultimate better buy-in into the treatment protocols.
That's right.
I think too, a lot of times the clinician, they're losing confidence and certainty because they're plugging in whatever their treatment is, and then they don't see their immediate results that they're doing, So I think technology gives you another avenue or a portal of entry for you to kind of see that the patient's actually doing better. Especially, looks like we have a bunch of young clinicians in the room. So when you're young, you don't have that feedback sometimes. I think the technology could also not only help the patient, but also help you gain confidence and certainty. I always tell our associates and people in our office, imagine if you had the amount of certainty that an orthopedist had when they're educating their patient off a structural finding. If you could come at them with that kind of certainty and confidence about what you're finding with the functional finding, you would find that their buy-in for what you're doing would be like astronomically different, really. And what happens is like it takes you a while to kind of accrue that confidence as time goes on. But if you're younger, you could maybe lean on the technology to kind of get that confidence sooner, maybe.
Want to tell them what you measured today and the effect it had?
Sure.
Is that okay?
This is the coolest story.
We had this brainstorm this morning, and at the end of it, and we were talking about mostly motion cap and how to leverage the information that it provides. But as most of the people up here know, that I'm a gadget geek. I just like to look at what's new and novel in the industry. And there was one is not necessarily that new. MSK ultrasound. I'm hoping folks are using more of that in the industry. Not necessarily just as a diagnostic tool. I want to stress this point is that this type of technology, and you're going to see very quickly of how we're gaining a better understanding of this fascial system, the bag that we all live in. Understanding how that moves is critically important. And MSK ultrasound has been a great tool to kind of evaluate, tissues dynamically in real time. And so this morning, one of the things that we did still blows me away. How much can I share? The experience? Well, the experience was the experience was I had the MSK ultrasound on the lower back. L4, L5.
L5, low back pain.
He gave me the location, obviously, and so I focused my attention on capturing the tissue dynamics in that region. But here's the kicker. He was looking for and indicated that he most likely would see a change in that tissue, but wasn't working that tissue locally. It was working on the cervical spine. Am I correct?
The whole spine above that up to C1.
There you go. So again, I'm leading in front of the master himself, but what we demonstrated within minutes, right? He identified the areas that needed the intervention, and I was documenting what was happening in an area that was not touched, and we demonstrated a significant change in the planar, mobility of those tissues. Again, blew my mind. I've been in practice 20 years. You just don't see that. And we talk about it, but actually being able to document it objectively was a really cool experience. So I call that the tissue screen. What Ryan has created with Kinetisense is the movement or motion screen. We can evaluate dynamic movement. MSK ultrasound, I'm leveraging that to be able to demonstrate what's happening at the tissue level. And then third, today I introduced them to a wearable device. It's a device, and I could use the name of the company because they're willing to share this, is a company called Knox, N-N-O-X-X. And they shared with me this wearable device that's using near-infrared light emitted through this little diode that you could put on any area of the body. Same thing. We applied it to the lumbar spine, same region. And what this wearable detects is nitric oxide or nitric oxide release, total and peak values, as well as muscle oxygenation, how that tissue is being oxygenated. And we can objectively measure those levels. And again, treating tissues above the area that we were measuring was demonstrating appreciable changes in nitric oxide, which demonstrates better oxygenation of the tissues that are being evaluated. To me, just blew my mind. We're looking at physiological changes, mechanical changes, and movement changes using the technologies that we have available now. This is not future telling. This is technology that we have right now. So that's my story of the morning.
So the most amazing part to me, I think, was that it confirmed the diagnostic process.
Yeah.
So you confirmed that you could actually see it on the nitric oxide graph as we did it.
Right.
That this caused a problem all the way down here. Uh-huh. When we fixed that, it changed the oxygenation of the tissue out here without even touching the low back.
Right. It still blows my mind.
So, and then the same thing, but it took a little longer to get the information, but the same thing, you're measuring with the MSK ultrasound, layers were not sliding, fix it up here, they slid in the low back.
Right. So think about what what our patients and clients are thinking when you can demonstrate those types of changes. Let's say you're not seeing an appreciable change in their pain outcomes, especially if you're working with someone that's more chronic. What a great opportunity to demonstrate positive changes that you're working in the direction that you're looking for. So that's how I've been leveraging it, and I'm having success by integrating some of these new technologies to be able to get that communication to my respective patients.
And have you ever worked with a patient and you get done, you know they're better because you're going through their functional audits, but they're wanting to tell you they're no better. But you point out to them, you're like, actually, Nancy, I know you hate to admit this, but I think like from a functional standpoint, you're actually quite a bit better here. Nancy will turn on a dime in a second once she understands that, once you point it out to her that she's better. It's human nature to bitch. You got to understand that. If you're going to treat human beings like they're just going to bitch. So we got to be able to objectify. We got to be able to know like the functional profile of our patients to see like, and that way we can report back to them if they're actually doing better. My experience has been some of the best manual therapists in the world, sometimes they're not great at that piece of it. They're like creating miracle after miracle after miracle, and they're not able to report the miracles that they're doing to their patient. Therefore, no one they're like the best kept secret because of that. Yeah.
That's right. Which kind of takes me to my next point. I mean, an incredible story. Obviously, seen a miracle basically done in person. So, devil's advocate, how do we as clinicians not get caught in the weeds with technology? How do we find these? And again, the answer is probably going to be weekends like this. But how do we actually find the things that matter to us when we take back to our office? Obviously, like measuring nitric oxide, doing motion scans. I mean, doing a diagnostic ultrasound. Well, crap, that's your whole appointment, right? So, like, how do we kind of sift through the weeds with technology and actually find what works best for us?
I think you have a good perspective on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that as the kind of the technologist of the group here. So honestly, it's interesting because as practitioners, and I'm a practitioner myself too, every time we're going to integrate something new into our clinical workflow, we think about our everyday clinical workflow that we have with our patients. We have to make sure that it makes us actually at least as efficient as we are currently or more efficient. That's really, really, really important. So looking for technologies that allow us to speed up our process of assessment, but not get caught up in this world, this issue of the objectivity to efficiency trade-off, which is totally a real thing, right? So we oftentimes think that if we want to add objectivity to our clinic day, we have to lose efficiency. That's what that trade-off is. A lot of the technologies coming out actually allow us to be more efficient and more objective. And I think the really important thing too, when we think about as clinicians, all of us, what's our greatest assessment that we have as ART practitioners, as chiropractors, as manual therapists, right? It's our hands. We never want to lose that. And technology is never meant to replace this. It's meant to augment it. So one of the key terms I want you to take away from this is that technology, if it's used the right way and implemented the right way, can be expert augmentation. We're talking about soft tissue experts here, right? Some of the best. We can augment you, take you to that next level by giving you objective screening, right? That takes you to a certain location that then you can apply manual palpation and start to treat that tissue.
Any more from that?
I think he said it perfectly.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly.
I think
Thanks,
I would
guys.
add on to that. So we actually had the Neurodynamic World Congress in Dallas this year at Parker University, and Dr. Leahy was there, and we had Michael Shacklock there. We had all the players there, Antonio Stecco, and it was interesting, like hearing everybody's kind of conversation. But Michael Shacklock has a really good quote or point. He says the technology or the imaging isn't the problem. It's the education off of the imaging that's the problem. So I think like when we start talking about technology, we all get a little bit nervous that maybe we're making hypervigilant patients that are afraid to move because they're not in the correct stereotype. But so we could have access to all this great technology, and that doesn't mean that we're scaring our patients or catastrophizing our patients into, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and that's like what the evidence-based group would try to they'd push back on us in this, I guarantee it. But
I think the most difficult thing that we have, everyone's learning the palpation, everyone's learning the protocols, and we're getting a lot better at it all the time. I think that's a never-ending process. But the most difficult thing to do is to watch somebody jump and say, it's your adductor magnus.
Yeah, right.
That's the most difficult thing to do. That's the biggest learning curve in that. So I can say that, right?
100%. Yeah.
What we've embarked on is a way to actually quantify all those motions and relative motions between tissues and joints in a graphical form that you can overlay and see, yeah, that guy's running, but when the knee flexed, the hip flexed too soon, which means there's a problem between the rectus femoris and the vastus intermedius. But that's difficult to see. That's a real steep learning curve. But if you can see it on a graph, this peaks before that does, and then have a list, okay, this is what that means. And then you look at the video again, then you can connect them. So I think it will be a fantastic learning process to bridge that gap into really effective on-the-field diagnosis.
Which I think takes us to the amazing part of this all. I mean, us as educators up here, and you all are going to be educators at some point in your lives, whether that's your patients or, teaching on a stage. Shortening that learning curve is what we're all trying to do. We're not trying to take away from patient interactions that make Mike Leahy, but trying to kind of maybe shortcut that, or at least point out the ways of hey, Mike Leahy's going to look at this place right here. You should also do that. And here's the indicators. And I think that that's kind of the goal with this partnership between ART and Kinetisense. And so I got excited, us talking about it behind the scenes. I'm happy that you brought it up. So can you kind of expand on that, of what that actually looks like from an interface perspective, from a technology perspective?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We think about data-driven care, and what really drives data-driven care is you have to have the data. And so that's the really cool thing with Kinetisense, is that we're using commercially available hardware, the iPad Pro, that has a 3D sensor with our algorithms that allows all of you to turn into movement scientists. Really, really cool concept, right? And so as movement scientists, what we get to do is we get to basically create one of the largest MSK studies that has ever been done. And we get to take that information, of course, non-identifiable information, and look at change that occurs with different protocols. So maybe it's protocol 1 plus protocol 5 plus protocol 52 in combination that makes the greatest change, as an example. I'm listing protocols. But that makes the greatest change. Things that we've never discovered before as MSK practitioners, because we're starting to look at normative data in the population sets. Not only age, gender, but also body type, right? So, I'm 5'9" on a good day.
Subtle
you
brag.
guys are tall.
Depending on
How tall are you guys?
Nice flex, bro. The old Ron White story, depending on what gas station I walk out of, right? That's
I'm seriously, I wish there was like a jack that I could like lift my anyways. I'm the short guy in the panel. But what if we started to think about the lever arms and our body and how we move based on things like femoral length, torso length? We've never done that before, right? I'm going to move much differently than Dr. Leahy, right? Dr. Leahy's much taller than I am. So we start to look at that, and we start to look at compensation patterns. Thank goodness for you. We start to look at compensation patterns, and then we start to look at what are the firing patterns? What's normal, what's abnormal, and then be able to look at the protocols and the changes. And imagine having an expert like Dr. Leahy in the room with you treating your patient. That's kind of what we can almost emulate here, right? So that's insanely powerful.
I think too, like, it's subtle brag here on myself. Probably no one in this room's seen more people throw baseballs than myself. And even as much as I've watched people throw baseballs, I still, with a naked eye, I still rely on technology to be able to tell me that. So, I mean, as much as you watch human movement, some human movement is happening so quickly that you just literally can't pick up on it without the use of technology. So I think that also is, understated probably in the world of what we do.
100%. It's looping that. It's basically, again, that expert augmentation by taking normative data sets, pumping it back into the system, and then a concept we call clinical triaging. So we're not too far away from actually being able to recommend and almost recommend certain treatment pathways, like a combination of ART protocols, but also taping protocols with RockTape to the areas that need stability. So it's very empowering. And then we can recheck, because it's an objective system, we can keep rechecking that patient along their journey, and we can collect what we call as trend data. Is that person progressing the same? Are they improving? Or all of a sudden, maybe they have an injury, they regress, but now we have baseline to compare it to, which is super cool.
How many folks have been challenged, being manual therapists, which we all are, as it relates to we talked about this earlier, the evidence-based community saying, are we really making a change? How do we communicate this? Do we need more science? Well, what a better way, in my opinion, having a clinical lab in your hand that you can document change objectively, and then serially connect that, integrate that with thousands of practitioners to demonstrate the outcomes that we're having with our hands on someone's body. To me, it just makes total sense. We need to elevate our game to actually do the science. And a lot of us want to be scientists, but we don't want to, leave our clinics and go to a university lab. So we have the opportunity to take advantage of technology to actually get the data that we need.
I'd say one thing, this is a really important concept, is what has been the missing link in the MSK space in healthcare? What do we think's been the missing link? It's been that objective technology tool. Cardiologists have Holter monitors and every, we have MRIs, we have all these different technologies in different phases of healthcare. This is our chance through data to really take the whole MSK field to the next level, and it's super exciting.
It is. We talked a little bit. We did a podcast beforehand, the four of us, and one of the things that you brought up, or I can't remember, maybe it was Capo too, is shifting our outlook on research from a university, white walls and a table, double-blind controlled, to clinical research. And I think that that's really what everybody's striving for. I know, Capo, that's where you pull a lot of your data and a lot of your ideas is from more clinical subsets of data. So one of the cool things with Kinetisense, and I know RockTape is going to be involved with it as ART, is building that bank of data that we can then use to normalize movement. And so I'm sure that's what kind of piqued your interest with kind of connecting with Kinetisense, no pun intended there. And so can you kind of talk through what are some of the things that you're really intrigued on when you get this bigger data set, once you have your amazing ART providers start plugging in data?
Well, what we're working on now is you do a screen on Kinetisense. It takes, for the efficient one for our on-site programs, it took 58 seconds for him to do that.
Seconds, yeah.
And the computer then will give you a prioritized list of treatment protocols. The ones that are directly involved, and then the ones that may be secondarily involved. This one affects that one, which affects the overall problem. And then it records what you treat as well. And then records the result of the treatment. So as the database grows, we'll have a starting place, but we'll be able to prioritize that list more exactly for this problem really means this first and this second and this third. And we'll just get better and better and better at it. And all of us as providers will get better and better at the diagnostic process, because we've got that objective feedback saying what it actually is.
Right. Is there anything that maybe, it's kind of a random question, is there anything that maybe the data is going to show you to change your mind? Or do you think that your diagnostic algorithm is going to be kind of lined up perfectly? Or do you think there's maybe some things that'll be a little bit off? I'm kind of putting your feet to the fire there.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think we all should be open to the idea that we don't have the whole answer. If we lose that, we're going to go down the wrong road. That's right. So, that's what we're looking for. We're looking as much for what we're doing that's not efficient as well as what we're doing that's working.
Right. Love that.
But the beauty of science is always to check your hypothesis, and someone being at this level being open enough to say, I'm willing to be proven, wrong, or at least, incorrect in respect to a certain application, just makes us better overall. So let's leverage it.
What happened this morning is a prime example. It was like 3 mad scientists in a room, but honestly, it was Capo showing some of these technologies like Knox and diagnostic ultrasound. And then Dr. Leahy saying, let's test my protocol on this, right? Like that's what leadership is in this space. So then we went through the protocol, and sure enough, and I think you knew deep down it was going to make a lot of change, but it was proven. And then Capo and I were just like,
Blown away.
that's crazy, to the point that we need to do a study on this.
Yeah, I thought I knew, but it hadn't been proven.
And I think bringing ourselves to the scrutiny of science is one of the beauties of science, right? And I know that's kind of something that has intrigued you, I'm sure, Capo, on RockTape. Obviously, you told me in an email that, hey, I'm the tape guy. Don't ask me other questions besides tape, but I'm not going to do that. So talk us through that scrutiny of science. I mean, we joked about you guys' weekly Zoom calls, and you have some different wearable on, or you're testing something different on yourself. And so, how do we then, as practitioners, get better at this? I think I know the answer of trying it on ourselves, but then where do you kind of see this space moving towards in technology? Obviously we have, motion capture, and you're trying all sorts of gadgets and things like that, but what's the next 5-10 years of technology look like?
It's a great question. We should just be always looking for new and novel technology to improve our overall outcomes. But more importantly, as I said before, I'm leveraging technology to get better connection with the individuals that I'm working with. It's always about the patient, the client, and their understanding. And quite often, taking advantage of technology just helps me to close that gap. So I'm going to keep leveraging it until I can.
Love it. One big kind of overarching thing you just mentioned there again was patient education. And so we've kind of beat around the bush a little bit, but and I asked this question to you earlier, Ryan. Someone, you walk into a random clinic in Troy, Missouri, and somebody has a Kinetisense. What would make you happier, or what is your ultimate vision for someone in a small practice like that that's integrated, that maybe doesn't have a ton of help, or that's just a one-man show? Like, what would you like to see, and how would you like to see that integrated in the best way?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And really when we're looking at Kinetisense, it's about objectifying, and it's that expert augmentation. So the clinics that are really using it, I think, to the best of its abilities, and from a clinical standpoint, from a flow standpoint, they're actually applying or having staff come in and run some of the screens, which now frees them up as practitioners to do more treatment, which is fantastic. Still explaining the results to the patient, but the screen can actually be done by another employee even. We have clinics that have a big screen TV in the waiting room, and there's screens happening right in the waiting room, and it's cool. And the community's coming in, the sports teams are coming in, getting screened. And really, when I think of the clinic of the future, or the clinic that's now, because the future is kind of now, let's call this the kickoff to the future, is that a lot of times, like I know in my clinic, because we do hands-on soft tissue, we tend to see a lot of pain patients, don't we? We tend to see a lot of patients that have maybe a shoulder issue or shoulder pain, and we're going after certain areas, and thanks to the diagnostic algorithms, we're able to look at other tissue. But imagine we could have 50% or 60% or 70% of our clinic that was also performance-driven, where we're actually doing functional movement screening to an athlete that maybe doesn't have pain, but wants to enhance their performance. We map their body, and now we're doing ART to the planes of those joints that are restricted, or where there's tension in muscles or fascia, to free them up from a performance standpoint. Or if they lack stability, doing performance taping. That's the next level, right? That's the clinic of now, I guess. Right? So that's really exciting. So I think it's going to change the whole dynamic, where it's going to open up a whole new section of your practice, so to speak, in your communities, and allow you to differentiate to even a greater level.
Love that.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's on all of our minds too is reimbursement. Anybody here like to make money? Huh? I'd like to pay my bills, right? So as healthcare changes, I was just telling them a month ago, I was the lucky recipient of an appendectomy here in Orlando. I was on vacation. And objective findings is something that happens every 3 hours in a hospital. So they're doing it for reimbursement purposes. I assume the next 5 years, we're going to have to be a little bit more objective when it comes to getting reimbursed from healthcare system. So how can, and this comes from a little bit of a question from the audience, to what degree can we then transfer this objective data into our electronic health records and into our reimbursement to third-party payers?
Yeah, a great question. So what's happening? There's a massive paradigm change happening. We started Kinetisense 10 years ago, and we're at the end of this shift that's being created in our space, where objectivity is not only beneficial, it's actually being required. We're going to see in the next 2 to 3 years that our insurance payers are actually going to require this level of data. It's already starting to happen, and our practitioners are seeing that. So there's going to be a shift there. The cool thing with Kinetisense, though, is that the payers are actually giving billing codes out to doing assessments with 3D technology like Kinetisense. You can actually get compensated to do these assessments, of course. So there is that shift that is happening. The cool thing about Kinetisense is if it's used the right way, you can actually adjust your practice to a cash-based practice quite quickly by doing community screening. If you show a lot of value, if you can demonstrate a lot of value in the screening and the technique, it allows you to morph a little bit so that becomes less of an issue too.
Which, Dr. Leahy, ART is known for bridging the gap between large businesses, manual therapy, driving down healthcare costs. I have to imagine data like this is going to help you to sell ART to corporate health.
It'll help us sell ART, but even much more than that, it'll help us all to get paid by insurance companies, because not only is it objective data, these are the numbers. They're hard and fast. These are the numbers. But not only that, what we did fixed it. So it worked with no adverse. So you can't not pay for that.
Right.
That's what they're in the business for.
Yeah, that's right. I love that. And then Capo, you're the futuristic guy here because I love your brain when it comes to all this. So, where does RockTape fit into this? I know you just wanted to talk about tape, but then how can tape and all the other cool stuff that RockTape does utilize technology to kind of position itself further as the expert?
You just need to keep stalking individuals like Dr. Leahy and Ryan, because that's what I've been doing for over 15 years.
I'm actually the one that stalked you like a year and a half ago.
My memory might escape me. But my point is that I did so because I truly believed, and I practice this way as well, is that I believe that tape, and you can talk about tape and other means of stimuli, but it allowed me to extend the benefits of my hands-on care. So that's what I kept reiterating to the ART team, that I believe that there's a possibility of integrating our modalities to extend the benefit of the treatment that we provide our patients and clients. So that is one thing that I still hold true, that I believe that what we're doing with the brand and what kinesiology tape can provide, which quite often is somewhat criticized for echoing more than it really does provide. But what I'm excited about as it relates to the future technology, if we're talking about technology in textiles, which is kind of my wheelhouse, I'm excited about taking advantage of some new technologies that I was even communicating today there's a super polymer that you're going to actually start seeing at the Olympics this year, which we've been able to marry with traditional kinesiology tape. It's a product that we're calling RockTape X, which is ultimately a strain-resistant fabric. And what that really means is, and I'm being educated in real time as I'm telling this to you, that this material, this super polymer, has the ability to stiffen dynamically according to the speed of movement. So I want you to envision the future of athletic taping, which I believe this to be a component of, is that this tape could be applied strategically over an area that's been treated, for example, but we want that tissue to be able to modulate the amount of stress that it's being exposed to while it's healing, right? We've actually created some disruption of the tissue, and we want to provide that normal healing opportunity. This tape will actually stiffen if and when necessary. And that's what I'm really excited about, is that this new technology that can even be applied into a textile is opening my mind of what we have the ability to create moving into the future. And then one more, if you give me the opportunity to share this one, because I feel that's really cool. as it relates to technology and textiles, if you guys haven't heard of phase change material, there's some really cool opportunity of taking this technology, if you will, this material that actually can translate energy and provide an experience to your nervous system that is very unique. The example would be if you're overheating, your temperature is rising, this material will absorb that heat and rebound the opposite temperature back to the body. So it actually can translate energy that we could take advantage of in respect to wearables and textiles that we could put on our body. So that's what I'm excited about as it relates to a tape guy.
I love it. I love it. I'd like to just shift the panel a little bit if we can and pick Dr. Leahy's brain a little bit. You know, when I first heard about, you know, you're talking about technology and things like that, I thought, wow, that's amazing. You know, I'm not going to say your age. I don't know how old you are, but you've had many years of clinical
75.
success. Perfect, 75. So a
Heading
lot of
into
people,
the fourth quarter.
yeah, that's right. So a lot of people would ask, I mean, why keep progressing? Why bring guys like into this? I mean, ART is a rocket ship. It's doing amazing. So I don't know, you know, give us a little pep talk on why progressing and
There's two
getting
reasons.
better. Yeah.
In my mind, there's two reasons. The one is, you guys have all heard me say it, we're either getting better or we're getting worse. There's no status quo. And I don't want to get worse. So I need to get better. The other reason is, in the market, we're competing with other modalities and groups. The only way to be successful is keep getting better, because I think everyone's trying to catch ART. So it'll last another year or two unless we get better.
Right. I love that. And then maybe you two too. I'd just pull the whole panel. Obviously, I'm just a young buck. I've been in practice for 6.5 years. I'm the lucky one to be sitting in this group right now for sure. But you know, Ryan, give us your kind of what drives you, what gets you out of bed every morning. You know, what are the things that really like push you? I think we can all have an education moment as young clinicians that, you know, we're hopefully as a group, we're not looking forward to that, you know, 60th year and then retiring. I hope that we're all striving well into our advanced stage. So what gets you up in the morning? What really pushes you to make Kinetisense the leader?
Yeah, no, it's thank you. It's definitely a passion-driven thing for me. It's I you know, quickly saw in my journey going into chiropractic, and we all have our own story, but I was able to work in a biomechanics lab at undergraduate studies and see 3D biomechanics at a high level, and then was honestly a little bit dismayed when I went to chiropractic school and they were teaching us that we had to use this like 300-year-old goniometer that the studies were telling us were not really accurate from an intra-examiner standpoint. And I was like, what? How are we supposed to, okay, so we can analyze range of motion, okay, but what about complex movements? And I'd ask the instructor that at my university, at chiro school, and they're like, well, you have to eyeball that. And I come from a family with a medical background, and I was just like, man, our profession is just missing this. Like, we need something to objectify and show. We know the changes that we make. That's why, you know, we continue to progress as a profession, but we're not doing it at the scale and pace that we should be. So it's just about going down that road of trying to objectify and show the changes that we make as professionals in this space. And it evolved from using the Xbox camera. Does everyone know what the Xbox camera? Yeah. So that was our version 1 of Kinetisense like 10 years ago, to now being able to do this on the 3D iPad Pro. So it's a passion-driven thing. If it wasn't, I would have quit a long time ago. But that's what gets me up at 5 a.m. every day.
Capo?
I don't have much more to add other than, you know, there was a quote that I was thinking about as we were talking about technology and that really resonated with me. And this is, I don't expect anyone to know this individual. This was said in the 70s at Xerox, at a national conference at Xerox. And this computer scientist said, and I'm probably paraphrasing, to be able to better predict the future, you need to invent it. And this is what I believe that we're actually doing here. We're inventing the future through a collaborative approach, open to the opportunity to learn more. And listen, as a tape guy, I get to take advantage of an opportunity to partner with individuals like this and concepts that I believe is going to elevate our professions collectively. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Love that. And then Brett, I mean, nobody has banged the manual therapy drum more than you, I think. And so as someone that we love being chiropractors, we're not ashamed of being a chiropractor, we're not ashamed of being a manual therapist. After sitting down with these awesome people talking about technology, like where's your brain at with all this, and kind of where do you see it?
I just think, I mean, if I could maybe share one story that literally changed my trajectory in my career, and I'll bring it back to Dr. Leahy too, because I'll close with that. But I studied with Dr. Levitt, who is a neurologist in the Czech Republic, absolute superstar, one of the best manual therapists that's ever lived. And I got to see him see patient after patient. Well, this particular day, he was seeing a patient who had a cervicogenic headache, middle-aged man, and had it for years. He, for 1 hour, assesses this patient. He joints plays every joint. He palpates all the soft tissues, trigger points, full gait analysis, does the Yonda screens. At the end of all of that, after 60 minutes, I mean, he kicked the tires, checked the trunk, and finally he's like, the biggest finding in this cervicogenic headache case is a trigger point in the patient's soleus. And I'm young, I'm like, okay, whatever, still shaking off a hangover from the night before in Prague, that I'm like, okay, well, do something about it. So he pulls out a dry needle and he walks over there and he dry needles his patient's, this trigger point in the patient's soleus. And I'll never forget what I'm about to tell you. Walks over to the sink, looks back over his shoulder like the sage that he was, and asks the patient, he's like, how's your headache? And the patient's like, my God, my headache's gone. Well, I was there for like weeks at a time. So I got to see him do this over and over and over again. And the one learning moment that I really appreciated was his ability to palpate, like his ability to know, and what he called was the key link of the case. And I think he was 92 years old at the time, and he would carry a leather journal with him to every single patient encounter at that time. And he asked me one day, he said, Brett, do you know what treatment will be my best treatment? And I knew it was a trick question, but the correct answer was it'll be the last treatment. And the reason was because it will have all those years of experience built into his hand. And I want to give you credit because I tell the Dr. Levitt story, but Dr. Leahy, you've been doing this on this seminar trail for 20 years. A story I have about Dr. Leahy that I was forever bought in. I was probably in Tri-7. We were doing an upper extremity in St. Louis. And I brought in a case for Mike to see, and actually one of my friends. So Mike, this guy had lateral elbow pain, and Mike assessed this guy's elbow. He assessed it for literally 30 seconds, and he goes, we won't be able to help him. He's got an annular tear of his proximal radial head here, so we got nothing for him. And what I really did appreciate, I felt like, I feel like when some technique systems, everything's an inclusion criteria. For him to say that, I don't have a tool to help that, I actually had more respect for him there than if he would have actually pulled a rabbit out of a hat and created a miracle out of the case, honestly. So, but the one thing that I think you don't get enough credit for, Michael, besides being great with your treatment, your ability to assess and palpate. And I would love to tell a story, and I've told the story ever since it happened when we were talking in Denver one time, not Denver, in Colorado Springs. So we're walking off, we're just kind of in passing, and so I asked Mike, I said, what do you think about like all these snot-nosed young kids that think that like you have your mechanism wrong on how ART is potentially working? And the savage that he was, he said, well, I don't really care. He's like, I'm going down to Denver right now to work on 30 professional athletes, and they're telling me they're getting better, so that's all I can work with. I'm like, that's a pretty good little mic drop there. But so to me, I think like in the world of technology, which we're talking about, and how to augment, that's my new word, I like that word, how to augment technology to help reinforce. We're not Carol Levitt, you're not Michael Leahy, we just don't have enough years under our belt, right? So technology can potentially close that gap for us and help us. I'm not saying you don't have a gifted set of hands. You do, of course. So I would say the future is the marriage between those two. And Dr. Levitt also said the best tool that's ever been invented for human diagnosis is, guess what? Your human hand. 100 years from now, if this hotel is still here, someone will be here, talking about manual therapy, because you literally cannot replace all the experience that is built into the human hand. So
it's beautiful, beautiful. Well, to close, we do have one really good question, actually. Hang on one second, let me find it. The question was about, so we're building all these data sets for Kinetisense and things like that. before we get these giant data sets, what are we comparing human movement to? So like, how are you creating a standard of care, or what's your idea of creating a standard of, well, this is what a gait assessment looks like, so this is what we're going to compare it to?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I guess one of the ways to look at it is running assessment, for instance. What's the perfect running stride? Do we know? Can anyone tell me what the perfect running stride is? Can anyone tell me? Sorry. Well, that's part of the answer, right? What's the perfect golf swing?
Not mine.
It's definitely not mine. It's not Capo's, right? But
Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah, Scotty Scheffler.
Now.
So I'm getting into golf. I love golf. My wife is really into it, so I want to hang out with my wife. So I have to also learn golf to hang out with her. But I'm not going to give her any tips, because that's never do that with your wife. But anyways, do we want to compare my golf swing to someone like Scotty Scheffler or John Rahm? Right? No, we don't, because we have completely different types of bodies, these lever arms, right? So we need to figure out what is normal, what is considered normal for population sets. That's primary. It's not just age and gender, like some of the studies in the university labs will tend to go after. It's more than that. So once we know what's normal, and we also look at what is symmetrical. We're talking about 3 planes of movement, triplanar symmetry. So today we showcase the new gait assessment module, which is, I think, going to be fantastic for all your practices. From 15 feet away in a hallway, we can have the person walk towards our sensor, and we get a representation of their overall twists and torques in all 3 planes of their gait cycle immediately, and an overhead trace of their deviations in their gait cycle. If the only thing we do is just get them symmetric and try to get them symmetric based on our protocols, our palpation, our diagnostic algorithms, we're making significant change. It's about symmetry. Let's just fight for symmetry. And if we have a tool that shows if the person's symmetric or not, that's just the starting point. Then we compare it to normative data sets based on age, gender, and body type. And I think we are so far ahead from where we currently find ourselves.
It's a starting point. I think that's the cool thing with it. I don't think you claim to have the answer to any of those questions, which is beautiful. I think anybody that claims that they have the answer to those questions probably doesn't have the data to support it.
It's going to constantly, this system has always been in evolution, and it's going to constantly evolve. And I'm just feel blessed to have friends and experts beside me here to help to navigate and speed that process up, because it is going to change MSK space, I believe.
I love it.
If I could just interject, some of the things, as it relates to, and I heard some people saying, yes, they would probably want to, echo John Rahm's swing and someone else's. And looking at experts or professionals performing a skill is definitely something we should look at, but it's only one piece of the equation. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been in practice 21 years, but I've been a strength coach probably 10 years longer, and I'm always interested in looking at how do we improve human movement, and what is that definition? And so I came up with a definition. I'm just curious, maybe you guys can ruminate on it and give me your opinion as you start thinking about it further. But this is the definition that I've come up with now, and I'll tie it to how I'm leveraging technology. But ultimately, my definition now, as it stands in 2024, is that movement fluency, and this is the definition I'm giving it, is the ability to perform a specific task most effectively and efficiently in any environment. And so what is that task? We were talking about, the demands of someone in their 80s versus the demands of John Rahm or a golfer that's on the 4th hole. It's always adapting. And so you're going to have to be able to be, and I always use, Nikolai Bernstein's concept of continually having multiple solutions to the problem. That to me is movement fluency, of not just having a way of swinging a golf club, but multiple ways according to the environment you're in. The beauty of Ryan's technology and Kinetisense, I could literally record someone accomplishing their task, so then we can tweak that individual for that specific goal. And that's how I've been really leveraging human movement, because it's the N of 1 that I'm really working with and trying to make them as effective and as efficient as I can.
Can I say one really, really quick thing here just to add to what Capo said? Yeah, thank you. as practitioners, I think the best practitioners in the world that I've had a chance to meet, they do one thing very, 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 very well in the assessment portion, right? We'll look at the assessment portion right now, is that they're able to figure out exactly what the functional capacity of that individual, that patient is at any given time at that specific point. And then they're able to look at what is the physical demand or functional demand that person has in their day-to-day, their activities of daily life, or where do they want to get to? So you made a really important point, because the senior that's 95 years old that simply wants to be able to get in a vehicle to maybe drive somewhere or see their grandchildren or what have you, their demand is pretty maybe lower on the scale, but what's their capacity at that time? We can evaluate that with Kinetisense. Are they able to meet that? Can we then apply strategies like soft tissue therapy, like ART or RockTape, to help them enhance and get to that demand? It's no different than the professional athlete, like you said. It's all, does capacity meet the demand at any given time? So we have to identify where they are on the continuum first, and then drive them with our expert augmented protocols to be able to meet that demand. That's what we do as practitioners in a nutshell, in my opinion. So, sorry to take over.
No, great job. I love that. Love that. Well, what a pleasure. Thank you all for hanging out with us today. Number one, thank you, Dr. Leahy, for creating this space. We got to thank all of our amazing people that put this on. So Jen and Michael and Dustin, our amazing audio technician. I mean, what an amazing setting. Congratulations for you guys for being here, for learning this technique. It's literally going to change patient lives, which is what we're all about, right? If we can just make one person better, I think that we've had a great career and a great life. And so, Dr. Leahy, will you just cap this off and end it with giving us just a little bit of inspiration for striving for greatness and striving to continue to get better?
That's the end game. We want more people to have better life, fewer people losing their job because of things that everyone says they can fix, but nobody does. We're going to break them out of that.
I love that. Well, I know that you're going to be around for the rest of the weekend. Stop by the Kinetisense booth. Take a look at the technology. If you're listening or watching, take a look at it. Obviously, RockTape, we don't have to say anything more. It's the leading tape in the world, obviously. That's what it is. And it all started by Capo. We're very happy. I'm just humbled. I don't know what else to say. It was a great conversation. I think we started the conversation, and hopefully we all continue that. Everyone in the audience, continue this conversation amongst yourselves, with your colleagues, in your own practices, because again, the data that you're collecting in your N of 1 and your patient encounters is going to change healthcare. It's just a matter of putting it to paper and putting it to maybe data, we'll put it that way. And that's what's really going to drive change. And I know one of the questions was whether or not Kinetisense is going to be able to provide the data to change these billing outcomes. And I think that it's not just Kinetisense, and it's not just ART, and it's not just RockTape, it's not just Gestalt, it's all of us. So I think if we can all start kind of shouting from the rooftops about how we're able to make these changes, and oh, by the way, we have this amazing data, holy smokes, give us a couple of years and then we're really going to have something. So.
The other thing too, I was blown away by how cheap the technology was. I mean, that was like the thing that when we were talking, I mean, $200, I mean, that's $200 a month is that?
$249 a month, yeah.
$249. So, yep.
It's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you again to the ART team. Give them a big round of applause, guys. ActiveRelease.com, Kinetisense, RockTape. Thank you all. As always, good luck with patients, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.